Welcome to the second session of IRS Rail webinars, this time on the EU's COVID-19 relief measures for the rail sector, presented by the International Railway Summit. I'm Jules Omura, the Managing Director of IRIS Events, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this session. At the last count, we had over 330 people from 57 countries on all 6 continents registered for today. Although we are talking about Europe's response to COVID, clearly it's a worldwide issue, and governments and regulators from across the world are interested in how the EU is dealing with the pandemic. Welcome to those of you attending our webinar for the first time, and welcome back if you attended last week's launch session. We've launched this webinar series to support the rail sector, which is facing an unprecedented level of challenge, and also to provide an opportunity for dialogues on policies, innovation and sustainability between rail operators, authorities and the supply industry. It was reassuring to hear policymakers and industry leaders predicting a cautiously optimistic future for rail travel last week. We heard from UIC and OTIF that rail operators and international organizations are coordinating their fight against the virus, and within 1 year, full rail activities should have more or less resumed, we heard. The European Commission will bring sustainable transport back to the top of the agenda, and according to the large UBS survey, post-COVID passengers are ready to shift from air to rail for longer distances. But the rail sector must do more to keep up with innovation, collaborate with other modes of transport, and drive the sustainability agenda the leaders told us. We also had a nice Twitter-friendly remark from Elisabeth Werner, Director of Land Transport at the European Commission, and I quote, "There will be a vaccine for COVID, but not against climate change." So if you missed last week's session, the video is available on demand on our website, iris.org. In today's webinar, we'll hear more about the concrete relief measures the EU is providing for the rail sector and the sector's response to those measures. We're once again fortunate to have the support of eminent speakers that we have today. We'll be announcing further sessions in the next days and weeks with the support of rail authorities, operators, and indeed sponsors. If you're interested in shaping the debate and leading the discussion, we'd like to hear from you. If you're interested in sponsoring our webinar sessions and take part in our signature matchmaking and one-to-one meeting program, do get in touch with us. We are tweeting live during this webinar. Follow us at Rail Summit, and our hashtag you can see on your screen is IRS Rail Webinars. If you enjoy the session, do continue the debate on Twitter and LinkedIn. Now it's my pleasure to introduce you to our moderator today, Libo Lockman, the Executive Director of the Community of European Railway and Infrastructure Companies, CER, which represents 70 members made up of European rail operators, their national associations, infrastructure managers, and vehicle leasing companies. My first encounter with Libo goes back 7 years ago when he spoke at the first edition of the International Railway Summit in Berlin, which, by the way, will also be where our next and the 10th summit will be in February next year. I remember being impressed that he traveled from Brussels to Berlin by train, and I subsequently found out that whenever his busy schedule allows it, he goes everywhere in Europe by train. And now millions of Europeans joined him last year as Flixcam or flight shaming became a buzzword, perhaps not unrelated to CER's drive for pushing sustainable transport onto the agenda. So Libo, over to you.
Thank you very much, Julian. It's really my pleasure. Welcome to everybody to moderate today's event, and thank you for your kind words about my even train travel. I can tell you that was just right yesterday when I traveled from Prague to Brussels by train, and it worked, and it was on time. So I can only recommend, to everyone to use the train, especially in those difficult times. And this is what we are going to talk about today. So what are the consequences of the crisis today, and especially with regards to the impact on a technical side, or interoperability and safety, what changes we have observed with regards to the regulation affecting the technical pillar of the fourth way package, the licensing and the certificates. We will definitely hear a lot more from Kier Fitch, the head of unit responsible for safety and interoperability, in a few minutes from now. But before we start, what I would like to ask is the organizers to launch the very first poll, so that that all the audience is properly involved in the session today. And as you can see, the poll is about very simple question, but very essential question. So the question is, what will be the consequences of the COVID-19 crisis on the rail market share in the medium term, so to say in 5 years? You have 3 options, you have 3 answers that you can choose from: increase, decrease, or no significant impact. So now you have some 30 seconds to respond. In the meantime, I'd like to advise you that it's not the only time that you will be able to get interactive with us. You will always have a chance to ask the questions, either by sending the questions via the question section in the control panel, or by clicking the raise hand button indicating that you would like to speak. So please say that if you choose someone to speak to, you will announce their name before they ask you the question. So this is what you should have in mind if you'd like to be interactive with us. Now, because we are more or less close to this to the 30-second dead limit for the poll, you have last 5 to 10 seconds to respond, and then we will go over to the first speaker. So here, Fitch. So do we still have, if I can ask organizers, do we still have some time to? 5 last seconds.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can close the poll now. I hope that we have received some questions. Sorry, some answers. Excellent. So we have the answers on display, and I would now ask here not only to speak, but also considering the answers that you can see on the display. So Kier, now the floor is yours.
So many thanks, Libor, and I'm very pleased to be here to discuss with all of you the very important issue, of course, of how we are helping rail through the COVID crisis, which has impacted rail as one of the transport industries extremely hard. Now, commenting on that, the poll, it's very interesting to see that there's a complete split, in fact, amongst you as to what is really going to happen to rail as a result of this. About a quarter are saying that actually it will reduce market share. I think it was 30% or so saying that it will stay where it is, and the remainder that it will grow. So I think that shows, if nothing else, that we really don't know what's going to happen. I think what we think is going to happen, or what we hope is going to happen, is that rail might finally take a slightly greater proportion of, well, hopefully a rather greater proportion of the longer distance traffic, that some of the shift from aviation to rail that we've long hoped for will finally occur. Of course, where there is much more concern is what happens with shorter distance commuter traffic, etc., where changes in working practices and perhaps people's fear of densely populated public transport will have a negative impact, certainly in the short term, or perhaps even in the medium term, if there's an unwillingness to invest because the scenario is not clear. But maybe we can come back to that in the discussions. What is actually going on? Well, COVID, as we know, has had a major impact. National passenger volumes have been down by 80%, I think in some cases by considerably more than that. International passenger services basically stopped. But freight has had a relatively good COVID. Certainly in the early stages of the crisis, it seemed that getting freight transport across borders by rail was much easier than getting it across border by road. And rail really did step up and fill some of the gap, of course helped in a paradoxical way by the fact that a lot of the passenger traffic that normally has priority was simply not there. But I think it does mean that we've showed that rail freight can play a much more important role in Europe's transport, and that is something we undoubtedly want to build on in the recovery period. Next slide, please. So, as we said, there was a key role in ensuring connectivity in the emergency. It was much more reliable. We want to build on that. And also, we had to develop very rapidly communication on green lanes to unblock flows during the crisis to ensure that the measures that member states were taking to enforce lockdowns did not impact on the flow of goods. Now, that was perhaps a much bigger issue in the road transport area, where there were many checks, lots of people who, of course, are not normally very well identified crossing borders. But we did also have issues in rail where we needed to ensure that there were not measures preventing train drivers, and in particular some of the other railway staff crossing borders, where we had to ensure that maintenance facilities would be kept open to ensure rail operations could continue. But I think now we move very much into the recovery period. So what have we done initially to assist in rail getting through the crisis? Well, as you may know, there's been a very large amount of emergency legislation adopted across the transport field and undoubtedly in rail. For us, this fell into 4 distinct areas. The first is the so-called omnibus regulation. This was a set of measures for all transport modes, extending the validity of various of the operational certificates, licenses, etc., that are required by transport operators on the basis that it was simply impossible for those to be renewed where they came up for renewal during the crisis period. So earlier in the month, the omnibus regulation was adopted in relation to rail. That extended the validity of railway undertaking safety certificates and of train drivers' licenses for a 6-month period, potentially renewable if there's a continuation of the crisis in the autumns. We hope not, but we had to make provision for it. And also with the potential for member states to opt out of that extension if they felt that they didn't need it, if there's some of the member states less hit by the crisis and they could actually continue with their normal renewal operations. And a few member states have indeed taken advantage of that. The Commission will be publishing, well, it has been publishing a series of notices over the last few days as member states have informed us of their opt-outs. And I think the consolidated document will be published probably tomorrow, so everybody will have a clear picture of what has happened on the licenses. A particular feature for rail, of course, is that we were hoping that next week would have marked the final completion of the 4th railway package, with the transposition by those member states who didn't do so last year of the technical pillar of the 4th railway package. A very important piece of legislation because it allows us finally to move to the European Railway Agency in Valenciennes the primary task of certifying railway undertakings with safety certificates and of authorising railway rolling stock. Unfortunately, of course, with the deadline being the 16th of June, it was impossible for a number of member states to complete their transposition package simply because national parliaments, etc., who had to approve that legislation had to be closed down during the COVID period. So we have therefore adopted emergency legislation also allowing member states to further postpone that transposition deadline. The transposition deadline in the end, in a compromise between the European Parliament and the European Council, the member states, has been postponed until the 31st of October. But again, recognising that some member states were in fact ready, we gave them an option of continuing with the transposition on the 16th of June. And 5 of the member states which didn't transpose last year have indeed taken advantage of that package. And importantly, that includes Germany and Denmark, So that means that with Netherlands, France, Italy, and effectively Switzerland, which have already transposed, there is a large block, or as of next week, there will be a large block of states on the western half of Europe where the fourth railway package does fully apply. The other states which are going ahead on the 16th of June, so next week, are Slovakia, Croatia, and there's a fifth one which I've forgotten, we'll no doubt remember during the course of the presentation. In addition to that, we also had to align a lot of the secondary legislation with this package to ensure that the dates, etc., set out there align. We've also made it possible both for applicants who are planning to apply to NSAs under the old legislation that will now end up applying to the European agency because of the change in deadlines or because they couldn't apply before the deadline to apply to ERA using their old legislative based documents, and similarly for applicants who had planned to go to ERA actually and still to go to the member state national safety authorities with the old documents. So that's just to try and make life easier for the sector in managing the rather difficult position that they've been put in with regards to current applications. There are also changes to the system for entities in charge of maintenance, where again new legislation does come into force next week, where we've clarified that certain aspects of that do not have to be applied this year but will be postponed. And also we've clarified some of the details surrounding what precisely has to be done during a transitional period of a couple of years, again giving slightly more flexibility. And then finally on the relief package, we've issued guidance on passenger rights, which of course there is still an absolute right for passengers who could not travel because services were suspended to have refunds for that, but we have tried to give some degree of support to member state railways which are unable readily to refund that money, to allow them to encourage the use of vouchers, etc. Moving on to the next slide then. And of course, the European Railway Agency, and you'll hear more of this from Joseph Doppelbauer in his presentation in a minute, but we have asked the agency to play an important role in helping restart transport, in particular in regards the health measures that must be taken to ensure that as we restart the economy, we are not compromising health, but at the same time that we do this in a way which is coherent across Europe and which is proportionate. ERA is working on this, and in particular, they're working very closely with the European Centre for Disease Control, with OSHA, and also taking contact with the Aviation Security Agency, EASA, to develop various guidance and protocols similar to that which you've seen EASA already develop, to try and ensure that as we move forward, we have a common approach across Europe to the various health measures necessary for rail. And we think that's important to give reassurance to passengers when they're travelling, that they don't see very different measures in different places and think that that is maybe a sign that some member states are not doing enough. It's also to help the cross-border operators as they step up, that they will not face different measures in different parts of their operations. And then finally, moving on, of course, so the next slide, please. Well, in fact, we can move on to the final slide. Next slide again. Finally, looking to the future, of course, the industry has taken a very substantial economic hit, and we are looking, as with all of the rest of European industry, at how we support the future development of rail. You've seen published again last week the recovery plan for Europe. That includes a very, very large 750 billion instrument for supporting industry. and you'll see from some of the detailed documents surrounding that that we do expect a substantial part of that to be used to continue to ensure the delivery of the Green Deal and therefore to support investment in low carbon, decarbonised transport. There aren't, I have to say, very many specific references to rail in that document, but I've certainly been in conversations where both Vice President Timmermans and Commissioner Breton have spoken, both of whom have given considerable assurance that they do recognise the role that rail has to play in that recovery process. So I think it's clear that some of that money is certainly available for rail for future investment, and of course it's very much there for the sector, therefore, to make its case for why actually we should have an important part of that future funding. So I'll stop there, but of course I'm very happy to further discuss this in the discussion later. Many thanks. And I believe it's back to you, Libor.
Yep. Thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you very well.
Super, excellent. No, thank you very much for your presentation. In fact, you have addressed two issues. One is related to the general situation resulting from COVID, especially with regards to the health and safety and the role of the agency in it, which I believe that will be further discussed. We're going to further discuss with Josef in a few minutes. But what I would be interested in before we switch to Josef, the circumstances that now we have to cope with after the extension of the deadline for the transposition of the fourth railway package. I mean, now we have the term between June and October of 2020, where the states can transpose and implement the fourth railway package technical pillar. So how do you expect, or how do you envisage the period will be run rather smoothly for all the applicants, whether coming from the industry side or from the side of the operating community, that there will be the possibility to avoid, any patchwork in managing the situation that some of the states, member states, have already transposed the directive. Some of them are delayed, but not all of them will then deliver by the 31st of October precisely. So there will be quite of unstable and rapidly changing environment in the transposition of the directive. So is there any advice you can give to the operating community?
Well, I think the first thing to say is the situation shouldn't actually be unstable and rapidly changing. Just to be very clear, what we have given member states is a binary choice. Either they transpose on the 16th of June, i.e. next week, or they transpose on the 31st of October. They can't choose a date somewhere in between. Of course, that would have become operationally extraordinarily difficult for both the railway agency and also for individual operators, individual manufacturers. So it's either next week or the end of October. Beyond that, as I've said, we've also tried to make life rather easier for applicants by clearly saying that if they've prepared an application pack, essentially under the old rules, the third railway package, but because their project was a bit delayed because of COVID, they end up going to ERA for authorization rather than to an NSA, that ERA will take the application on the basis of the old documentation. And similarly, the other way round, that if they end up going to an NSA when they had expected to be going to ERA because the application was to be put in after the 16th of June, they will be able to use the application pack that they prepared for ERA with the NSA. So I think we've tried to give as much flexibility as is possible and appropriate in the situation. And I think also in terms of avoiding patchwork, the fact that at least for a large part of Western Europe, you do now have Germany and Denmark joining the countries that have transposed. I mean, that means there's a very large area where, in fact, the agency will be capable of delivering all of the certificates.
Okay, thanks for that. I mean, we will have some more questions. I even see them already on the list of the questions that are arriving. But now it's time to move to Josef Doppelbauer, the Executive Director of the European Union Agency for Railways. But before we give you a floor, Josef, we still have to go through the next poll. I mean, the first one has resulted in quite an optimistic outcome, because you have been most of you answering that you expect an increase of the rail businesses or the rail market share. So now it's the second one. What do you believe should be the priority for the EU rail policy after the COVID-19 lockdown? You have three options to choose from. It will be either enable quick reestablishment of the rail connections, or building the infrastructure to complete the EU transport network, or alternatively also boosting the European Green Deal. So again, you will have the 30 seconds to answer. In the meantime, I'm really grateful that we have Josef with us this afternoon, because as already indicated by Kier, the agency is already playing and will play even more important role with regards to acting as a one-stop shop for all the future safety certificates for the railway undertakings, for the vehicle authorizations, for the assessment of the ERTMS trackside installations. And on top of that, and this is what I'm really curious to hear even more, is the proposed elaboration of the guidelines for the health and safety. But I'm sure that Josef will explain us how the agency is going to tackle all those new challenges. So for the audience, you have last 5 seconds to answer the poll. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and organizer can stop that. Yes. So what is the outcome? Can we have the outcome? Boosting the European Green Deal. Josef, how do you see that? Josef, can we hand over to you now?
Now I should be online. So good afternoon, everyone. I believe that is a very good result, because indeed, and I will come back to this in my slides, we need to boost the Green Deal, which is taking care of the climate issues that should not be hidden behind the crisis. And in the Green Deal, rail should play an important part. So for me, this is a very clear and positive message. So, can you see my screen already?
At least I can do so. I can see them. So yes, go ahead, please.
So, in the next 15 minutes, I would like to talk with you about how can we together strengthen the railway sector. In particular, how can we strengthen trust and confidence? And before I do that, I just would like to remind everybody that we are very close to a historic date. Originally, the 16th of June 2020 would have been the date by which the agency would have taken the full position as European Authority for Railways. You all know that the European Union Agency for Railways was founded in 2004. We are headquartered in Valenciennes, in the north of France. We have currently around 190 staff. And since June 2019, we are also issuing vehicle authorizations, safety certification, and ERTMS approval. Initially for 8 member states. And here on this slide, I show you a kind of dashboard what we have delivered since 16th of June 2019, more or less showing that in vehicle authorization we have already delivered close to 600 decisions. So the figures are as of the end of May. We have authorized already 7,800 vehicles. So 7,800 vehicles are running on European tracks. The majority of these vehicles is, of course, freight wagons, but we have about 300 locomotives and a couple of EMUs and DMUs. Out of the 600 decisions, 560 are conformity to type, and we have 18 pre-engagement baselines and 21 other authorizations. On the side of safety certificates, we have delivered 11 until May. Amongst these are important ones like SNCF Freight and SNCF Mobility and also Trenitalia. 9 projects are ongoing. We have ERTMS trackside approval as the third major area of our new mandate, and there we have 10 initial engagements, of which we have already closed 4, and we have 5 applications ongoing. Now, the agency has been on teleworking from the 13th of March until basically now. We have reopened the office as of 2nd of June, but we have delivered a number of these decisions also in the teleworking situation, so we were not really impacted in our delivery performance. Now, as Keir has already explained in detail, there has been a recovery package for COVID, which has finally been agreed by the Council and the European Parliament. The deadline for transposition of the technical pillar is postponed to the 31st of October. And we have the 5 member states, Germany, Denmark, Croatia, Latvia, and Slovakia, transposing on the 16th of June, and all the others are coming on the 31st of October.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Sorry, I cannot hear what was said. May I continue?
Joseph, yes, please go ahead and continue.
Okay, so in line with the delay of the transposition date in the directives, also the implementing acts were revised, and the implementing acts also contain new transition arrangements. Now, here you see, as Keir has mentioned, on the map, there is already quite significant green on this map, and this significant green shows that we have a good block now in Western Europe, and actually the geographical situation is that we have 13 out of 26 member states, so more or less half of the member states transposing now next week as of 16th of June 2020. Now, the COVID-19 situation clearly has an impact on the authority activities in regard to the applicants, because the applicants are not always in a position to deliver all the required evidence. So in order to mitigate this impact, the agency has issued a number of clarification notes. Some clarification notes are in relation to the work of notified bodies. Then we have also a clarification note for single safety certificates. And finally, we have also devised some mitigating measures for the certification of ECMs. All these clarification notes are available on the website of the agency. Now, I would like to come back to the outcome of the poll and to the majority of the participants believing that the Green Deal should be pursued with priority. I'm of the firm belief that the end of the COVID-19 lockdown is a golden opportunity to establish rail as the most relevant transport mode in the European Union. And in order to make the modal shift happen, we need to pursue a number of actions. We need to connect the major urban areas, and we need to connect the main airports by rail. In my view, for distances up to 800 kilometers, we need to make intra-EU flights redundant. And we also need to revitalize the night train network, which means that we give alternative offers to our travelers. We need to pursue the industrialization and digitization of rail, which means also to upgrade the lines with ERTMS, but we also need more integrated ticketing, and we need to progress towards data modularity. And on the physical level, there are still some bottlenecks in the European Union railway system, in particular across borders. So we need to target the investment to create more international borders. And we also need to create an institution that can do an efficient allocation of capacity for rail in Europe. Now, obviously, we must make rail attractive for the users. We need to make rail attractive by creating a truly European network for freight and passengers, day and night, with common rules and with a coordinated allocation of the routes. And clearly, when a passenger decides which mode of transport he should take, he will use a number of criteria, like the availability of the connection, like the comfort, travel time, last but not least, the price. But now we have an additional criterion, which is health and safety. And on this aspect, of course, it is also important that the rail sector as a whole approaches the situation with the right attitude. We need to establish trust, we need to establish confidence, and we need to positively welcome the passengers. Now, for that, we need to fight the current situation where in some countries we have lost 85% of the long distance rail passengers, up to 80% on the regular and regional passenger services. And we also need to continue to deliver efficient rail freight. And as most of the participants agree, we need to keep the Green Deal a political priority. Rail is definitely there to support the climate goal of the Green Deal and will help to revive the European economy. Now, I'm coming on the next slide to what the agency at the request of the European Commission has established, which is an information platform for European railway sector on the COVID-19. It's a kind of clearinghouse where we exploit our existing networks with the national safety authorities, with the representative bodies in the sector, and with DG Move. We want to promote safe and efficient recovery of the rail services. And of course, the underlying principles are based on high standards of health and safety for both employees and customers. We need to have a flexible framework because there are still different conditions in the different member states. And first and foremost, it is a platform for discussion and information sharing. We have the goal to promote mutual acceptance of the measures, and we want to promote a consistent approach also across modes. This is why we are in close contacts with our sister agencies like EASA and EMSA, and we validate all our recommendations with the European Agency for Disease Control, ECDC. As Kira has mentioned, we will shortly issue a practical protocol in order to ensure business continuity under the objective of reducing the risk of infections at transport hubs and on vehicles. which should be a flexible set of measures because we need to respond to all future scenarios. The information on the measures and all the background is to be found on the website of the agency. And with that, I'm coming to the end of my slide presentation. I am convinced that rail is a transport mode that is safe. We can further work on connecting Europe with the relevant connections for passengers and freight to make Europe truly connected by rail and to keep the railway system affordable for all the users and the passengers. And again, we need to promote the Green Deal and to get the tracks free for a greener Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Josef. Thank you very much for your impressive slides and the determination to work further for the better future of the rail sector, especially after the crisis. We now are going to have two more panelists, but still before we go over there, I'd like to make a short stop under your, last by one slide about the health and safety recommendations. On top of the slide, you mentioned that it will be done in a cooperation with the stakeholders, with the institutions, with the authorities and so on. But then later on, you mentioned that the protocol is more or less ready to be published by the agency. So what should we see and by when? Because on one side, we have already the Commission's guidelines published on the 15th of May. On the other side, we have the services that have been in some countries already put in place, and including the international trains. And then and that there is flexibility certainly needed. So how are you going to position the new protocol, and how are you going to discuss this protocol with the stakeholders?
Well, on the first question, the protocol that we are preparing will clearly be integrated with the Commission recommendation and the Commission guidelines. So this is a joint effort, and we work in close cooperation with the Commission to fully integrate it. In regard to the cooperation with the stakeholders, prior to drafting our guideline, we had already a first round of consultation with both the representative bodies and in particular CER. You are via your colleague Enno Wiebe closely involved, and with the national safety authorities. Then we have shared the draft with ECDC for validating. If everything goes according to plan, we should receive the commented version back from ECDC today, and then we will of course again rediscuss with the stakeholders through our networks before we publish it. So we will get the document today, we will share immediately with the stakeholders, and then we will align with the Commission the publication.
That, sharing that with us will be highly appreciated because it's about tomorrow morning that we are going to publish our position towards the Commission guidelines, so that you will see, what is our reaction on what the Commission has published on the 15th of May. And I would very much like to have those views also considered in the protocol that you are talking about, so that we can have a chance to avoid unnecessary clashes or the divergence in the views, since we have to care, of course, of the business continuity. But that gives me also the perfect bridge to the next speaker, Kurt Bauer, the head of the high-speed and long-distance services at the Austrian Federal Railway. Kurt, I hope that you are online now, because I'd like to see you, and I hope that you've been able to listen to at least the last 5 to 10 minutes of the speech of Josef. So Josef addressed in the first place these health and safety measures that I mentioned already, that have been discussed internally within the community and within the stakeholders group. And he also mentioned, by the way, the expectations from the future night train services. And I know very well that you are the night train man in Austria. So I'd like to hear from you, briefly, the replies, the responses on both of those questions.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me here. Hello, everybody. First of all, I think we need to see different time slots. So the very first thing which we have to achieve now as railways, as European railways, is to ramp up the services again, which is actually not that easy, because one thing is the technical side, the other thing is the economic side. And if we speak about health and safety measures, like only selling 50% of the capacity, this will bring us into an economic problem as operators. So in the very short run, we will see, I suppose, that quite a number of railway undertakings, which are not operating under public services, will see financial difficulties. And also we see this with this night train business. We decided now for health and safety measures, for example, to only sell whole compartments, so private compartments, which means we restrict capacity on the train, which we can do for a certain amount of time. But if this takes for longer, we will see economic difficulties in the night jet business, as we will see, I suppose, in a lot of other businesses which are purely operating on a commercial basis. So the challenge is to be as safe and reliable, and also from a health perspective, reliable for our passengers, and keeping the economies in mind. This will be the first big challenge in the next, I would say, 6 months to start up the business. The question is then also from a health perspective, is there a long-term shift in behavior of travelers? And is there a long-term change of health requirements we have to fulfill as railway operators? This will be the next big question from an economic point of view. And this, I guess, has to be seen. I mean, yeah, once a vaccination, I think, is available, things will get back to more normal. But as we all know, this might take some time, and this definitely will keep us in these uncertain times, and we might well need some help. Like, I can give you a concrete example of Austria, where the purely economic service between Vienna and Salzburg is now temporarily paid by the state, because our competitor Westbahn and we as ÖBB clearly said we can at the moment not run this service on an economic basis. So for 3 months now, we have an order by the state, and Westbahn and ÖBB is ordered to provide these services. So there are quite a lot of challenges ahead, I think, in order to, in the long run, make the railway business the #1 transport mode in Europe. And that was very relieving for me to hear this very clear statement and position of the European Union, because I fully agree that's the only way forward.
Thank you, Kurt. Thank you for your, let's say, the first answer. We will be then coming back to various questions in a few minutes from now. But now I would like to introduce our last speaker, our last panelist, Nicolas Casse-Saint-Martin, the Chief Technology Officer and Vice President for Engineering at Alstom. Nicola, I mean, we've heard a lot about the legislative changes respecting or reflecting upon the crisis and the outcome of the fact that not all the authorities have been able to deliver the transposition of the directive on time, the extension of the validity of the certificates, licenses. So how do you perceive, what is the impact on the business of the supply industry with regards to the current crisis and the actions of the EU policymakers?
Yes, thanks to give me the floor, and good afternoon, everybody. So first, it's true that it's very good to have extended the fourth railway package transposition deadline by 3.5 months, but fortunately not more, as it is key. The fourth railway package can enter into force in all European countries as soon as possible, because as you know, it should hopefully clarify and streamline the authorization process, especially for trains having to run in several countries. Second, I think it's very good as well to extend the validity of type certificates by some months for batches having been impacted by the crisis in such an extent as they cannot be delivered anymore within the original validity period. Several projects are in this case in Alstom, and I guess it must be the same for other suppliers as well. And third, I would say, I think what Kirfich said about flexibility is very good, because in addition, for some projects that were to be authorized under the third railway package umbrella before June 16 in countries having not transposed yet, it is key we may continue and get authorization under this third railway package umbrella after June 16, even if these countries still transpose on June the 16th, because you know we have some projects that have been very much impacted by the crisis, and of which testing activity, which are very much involved in the authorization process, have been delayed, and so it's very important we have this flexibility. I have understood that it should be allowed up to end of October. I think it should be okay, but maybe in some cases it should be not sufficient, but we'll see.
Okay, I mean, thank you, Nicola. Now we will be slowly moving towards the full panel. So I would then like to see also Kier and Josef back on the screen. But before we go for that, we still have two other polls to be displayed. So if I can ask the organizers to put on the screen the next poll, and the next poll would be precisely about the question: how quickly will the commuter traffic recover and go back to a pre-COVID share? And there you have 5 options. Within 6 months, between 6 months and 1 year, between 1 and 2 years, more than 2 years, or even it will never go back to a pre-COVID share. So again, you will have 30 seconds to answer the poll. And in the meantime, I don't know whether Josef, you can hear us. Would you have a quick answer to what Nicola has been just commenting on?
The transition periods, I believe the essential element is good cooperation between the agency and the national safety authorities, because the transition gives now the applicants the possibility to demand that the national safety authority continues in the framework of the third railway package, but there might still be situations where the NSA cannot do it. So there has to be a handover at one point in time from the NSA to the agency. And the important element that is really decisive here is that we have a good communication from the NSA to the agency, so that we can really take it over seamlessly, so that the applicant doesn't lose too much time in this process.
Thank you. That's quite obvious that the cooperation and the communication here is a key. So now in 2 seconds we can close the poll, because it took already more than 30 seconds. So if I may ask the organizers to close it right now and to show us the results between 1 and 2 years. So it's kind of the moderate, optimistic view of the respondents, of the audience, and I'm sure that we will be able again to discuss that amongst the panelists, especially with regards to the answers to the replies to the first question, which was about the decrease or increase of the market share. So before we go to the full panel, we still have the final poll to be displayed. So may I ask the organizers to show us the fourth poll? Good, we are here. So what will be the impact of a significant change in the freight patterns? So more on the demand and e-commerce for the rail post-COVID. Increased market share, decreased market share, or no significant change? Again, you have some 30 seconds to answer this question. And in the meantime, I mean, here I hope that you've been also following the claim from Nicola about this transition period. On top of what Josef has commented, is there something that we should expect on the side of the Commission to be put forward?
Yes, I've been following it. I mean, I think from the Commission's point of view for the transition period, I hope we have done everything that is necessary. I mean, of course, as Nicholas recognised, for us it is important to get to the position where the fourth railway package is fully in operation as quickly as possible. But I think for the short-term transition period, by providing the flexibility to allow the old and the new application packs, if you like, to be used in parallel, we've done about as much as we can to facilitate that process. Of course, as Joseph has indicated, there is the need for liaison between the NSAs and the agency for those circumstances where an NSA runs out of time dealing with a case. But I mean, handover provisions have been in place since the beginning, so that's always been an issue. It's just that the time at which it occurs is different and perhaps slightly unexpected. So, I mean, of course, if there is a need for something that we haven't identified, we're here, we're in constant contact with the industry and we will deliver it. But as I see it at the moment, at least for applicants, I don't think there's more that is necessary. As I mentioned in my presentation, I mean, there are other issues in relation, for example, to entities in charge of maintenance where we have taken measures, but that's a different set of measures.
That's right. I mean, thank you for your reply. So now it's the time to close the final poll. The result is an increased market share. So we have a positive audience, because the audience believes that the rail market share will be increasing both on the side of the passengers and the freight services in about 1 to 2 years, if I interpret it in the right way. Then we can now close the poll, so we can display on the screen all 4 panelists. Thank you very much, organizers, for ensuring that. And we can even move to the questions posed by the audience, because then we have received quite a few. And I would start with the one which, in fact, I had also had in mind with regards to the speech or the presentation of Josef when he spoke about the protocol for the health and safety, which should not be that easy to get in place in a way that would be somehow harmonized and used for all the international services, given the fact that there are not still the national governments and the institutions that are prescribing the measures to be applied on a local level. But there is certainly the question that is valid and should be sent to the agency, and this is about the air quality in the passenger trains or air conditioning system. So is the agency considering working on a certain kind of the specification, which could be even inserted into the TSI with regards to the ventilation, air conditioning, or the heating system on board of the trains, preventing the dispersion of the viruses on board? Joseph?
Yeah, we have indeed studied in detail the situation of ventilation and air conditioning in trains. And we have also had very in-depth interaction with manufacturers, and of course also exchanged with EASA, because EASA has specifically issued some guidelines for flights. So this is currently being shared with ECDC, and I believe it's an important aspect because there are some clear lessons to be learned. But I believe in regard to the TSI, there are some parameters at the moment that are addressing the comfort, like you have to have a homogeneous temperature along the carriage, but in order to achieve a homogeneous temperature, you have to have some horizontal airflow, which is of course detrimental to the requirements of containing a possible infection. So somebody has earlier, I believe it was Kurt, has asked whether there will be some long-term impact. And I believe these are clearly those areas where we need to be very careful in the future what should have priority, a kind of perceived comfort, or is it more about making sure that diseases can be contained?
I mean, is there something, Kurt, that you would wish to respond to?
I mean, that health is always the first. I would fully agree. What worries me a little bit is saying that health, of course, health is more important than comfort. The problem is, if trains are not comfortable any longer, people will take the car. This is still our biggest competitor. So, and there you're on your own, you're safe anyway. So we will anyway see now a shift to the car again. There will be now a short period of time where car is definitely #1 priority in transport because people feel safe. What we need to make sure is that actually the trains are perceived as safe as ever and as comfortable as ever. But I think we're on the same line here with Josef. It's important to take both things into account. Yeah.
Now I have to turn to Nicola as on the side of the supply industry. I mean, is there something which we spoke about, the air conditioning, ventilation system? Are there any changes, any suggestions with regards to the design of the systems proposed by the supply industry?
Yes, first what I would like to say that of course the crisis is highlighting a little bit more this air treatment topic, but it's not very new because you know that we are already working on air quality and mainly about you know, the emission of low size particles. So it's not fully new, but it's true that now it is a little bit more on the grill. And of course in Alstom, and I think within the suppliers, we are working on some innovation to address the market evolution that might result from this crisis, working in collaboration with operators, with labs, with research institutes to develop new product solutions, be it on air treatment or on coatings, on anchoring and prehension, contactless, social distance enforcement, or cleaning and disinfection related maintenance solutions. So we are very much focused on these topics, and I think we are dedicating quite a lot of efforts in R&D on these topics.
Thank you very much. We have even two hands raised, if I'm not wrong here. If the organizers can help me, or even three now. Stefan
Yes.
Mettelet, yeah.
Yeah, I've Stepan Metalev, if you can hear us. I've unmuted your microphone. If you could state your name and company and ask your question.
Stepan, can you hear us? Maybe he's gone already.
Okay, so we have another attendee. I'm going to ask Miroslav Haltov to ask your question, if you can state your name and your organization.
Yeah, here is Miroslav Haltov, the Shift Rail States Representative Group Vice Chairman. I would like to thank to all speakers for very interesting presentations and also seeing the poll. I am surprised with some answers, and it's a chance probably to repeat this poll at the conference we are organizing in Prague at the end of November, beginning December. And we have also a dedicated presentation to the post-COVID situation. So probably will be good to see if we have a different answers after 6 months later. That's only my remark. Thank you very much for very impressive presentations.
I mean, we will see what will be the situation. In fact, in the 6 months, it refers me back to what I said already. We have the gradual restoration of the services, and at the same time, we are going to see the. We have seen already the guidelines from the Commission, and as well we see the upcoming protocol of the agency. So I'm really curious, you know, to observe what will be the recommendations and how we are going to be able to cope with them. The next hand raised is by Gopal Dalmia, if I'm right.
Yes, Gopal, we've unmuted your mic if you would like to ask your question. Okay, can you hear us? Okay, perhaps let's move on to another person. We have Jakub Majewski.
Yeah.
Jakub, you will need to, yes, unmute your microphone.
Okay, hello.
Yeah, we can hear you. So go ahead, please.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm Jakub Majewski from Poland, from Pro Kolej Foundation. This is NGO supporting the railway. And my general question is if you expect the big differences in growth or achieving the previous market situation between railway and other modes of transport. Because we see in Poland that the cars is growing much faster than railway after the COVID pandemic, and the aviation is still very strong frozen. So, in my opinion, it will be the path for railway will be something in between. But if this is the similar situation in other European countries.
I mean, in general, the mood has been quite positive. Obviously, I would go back again to Kurt because he's the representative of the RU. So, please.
So I think that's exactly what I said at the beginning. In the short term, the car will have a renaissance. I think that's totally logical and understandable. I mean, you feel safe in your own car. This will definitely last on this summer, especially because some services are not restored. It's just easier to hop on the car because international transport slowly is ramping up again. I think the short-term effects are not really important because it's a few months. The question is, do we see fundamental changes in behavior over the next 1, 2, 3 years? And we as railway undertakings assume yes, because digitalization has shown that a lot is possible, which was not thought possible 3 months ago. We would not have this conference here online if there wouldn't be Corona. The second thing is we will see in the next few years high unemployment numbers all over Europe. That means spending of the private sector will be limited, and they also spend on mobility. That's what they're going to do. The third thing is companies get under pressure to save money. So this whole industry of business travel will definitely shrink for the next few years. So the market which is available actually gets smaller. That's our point of view. So the passenger kilometers over all modes will be reducing over the next few years. And the question is, who gets which share of this smaller pie? And I think as railways, if we do it smartly, we can probably even get a bigger piece of the pie in an overall not really growing market. And now let me put it from a train operating side and budgeting side. We planned our upcoming years with a growing market. given alone that the market is not growing any longer, brings a lot of railways into budgeting problems. Again, we will see, like in the hospitality industry, in the restaurants industry, we will see tough years for trainway operators, no matter what's going to happen.
I mean, that's a crucial issue. Kurt, you mentioned the restrictions on the side of the decrease on the side of the demand and lower even income for the of the population. But that will lead me to the questions I need to pose both to Kier and Josef. All the new legislative proposals or the proposals that are in place and in the application, they of course have to respect that they have to bring us to the significant cost reduction in order to keep the competitiveness of the rail. So how do you see that? I will start with Kier and then of course go to Josef. What is in the pipeline that would really give us the drive towards the significant cost reduction of the industry?
Well, I think much of what we put in place in the fourth package is absolutely aimed at doing that, because certainly in terms of rolling stock and other railway products, if we can actually deliver much more uniform products across Europe, then we can get, Nicola and his colleagues can get to the position of producing trains in the same way as Airbus makes planes, where you actually build a single product that goes everywhere. Now it's going to take us a while to get there, but I mean, that is what we have fundamentally already put the nuts and bolts in place for. I think looking forward, and of course this is what I would hope some of the Green Deal package can be used to support, is the digital transformation. So using much more automation, using much more digitalization to drive down some of the costs of the system. If we can get to level 3 RTMS and start taking out a lot of the trackside equipment, that should bring very significant cost reductions. Of course, there is an investment required up front, which may be particularly difficult in these circumstances. But if we can get through that, we will drive down costs there. And hopefully we will also hugely increase the operational flexibility of the industry, which then brings further both potential savings, but also potential new markets.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's clear. Digitalization should be a key here. I completely agree. I would then have another question, but it's for later. Now, Josef, your stance in that respect, and also if I may be provocative again, your protocol on health and safety, how this is going to help the business case of railways.
Oh, I start first by coming back to what Kier said. We have now a good repertoire of tools that should make rail more cost effective. I believe now with the fourth railway package, at least one of the cost drivers, which is the authorization, should become more predictable and also more cost effective. I also hope that this financial pressure on the railway undertakings will also push for more standardization, which should take the costs out where it is not helpful. And coming back to the protocol that you stressed several times this afternoon, here again the intention is to help the railway undertakings, specifically in international transport cross-border, because we need to harmonize and we need to make sure that the measures are mutually recognized. It would be, give you an example, it would be very strange if we have different regulations on seat allocation, say in France and in Belgium, and in Lille, when the TGV from Paris stops, the people have to leave the train and get back on the train in a different seat arrangement. So the measure is clearly to facilitate, to make it easier to run cost-effective cross-border services and not to create an additional burden. And facilitating is possible when we collect all the inputs, when we mitigate the differences, and when we also have a flexible approach that can take into account the different situation in the different member states.
I was happy to hear that you've been also in a contact with the Aviation Safety Agency and the Agency for the Health and Safety, because what we believe needs to apply here It's the comparable conditions for the comparable type of the services. So, for example, long distance trains compared to the shorter aviation. So where the conditions need to be the same up in order to remain competitive. But now to Nicola, because we haven't heard from him for some minutes, and we heard about the harmonization and the interest of the industry to, of course, to harmonize and modularize and really to be also cost effective on the side of the production. Any comment to make here, Nicola?
Yes, I would like to say that it's true that the fourth railway package, with the streamlining and rationalization of the process it is going to bring, should normally help to be more competitive regarding fixed costs, authorization cost. That's true, and it's true to say that the cleaning of the national rules, which has been started and which is being nearly completed by ERA, to be sure that there is no overlap with TSI and there is no inconsistency with TSI. This is going in the right way, I think. Now, I think what we need to remain competitive is some stability on regulation and standardization. Because, you know, our railway industry, and mainly the rolling stock part of it, is a long cycle industry. So it's very difficult to amortize development costs if regulation changes too often. And, you know, moreover, regulation changes don't favor neither time to innovation. It's difficult to push and promote innovation if you have not enough visibility on regulation. And by the way, very often when you change regulation, it generally ends up with more regulation, which is not really good neither for innovation. So I understand that we need to adapt the regulation, but I think maybe we should revisit the TSI implementation strategy to better conciliate reaching a target system and more regulation stability.
Is that a question back to Kier and Joseph then?
No, it's just a statement that.
No, but that was.
I know.
Like we are not happy. So then, if you are not completely happy, now we have Joseph and Kier to react.
Anyway, I know. Anyway, they know that we are not fully aligned on this topic. So.
No, but on the contrary, I would say that we clearly understand the need for a target system. We clearly understand the need for stability, but we also need to have the necessary flexibility to accommodate innovation, and in particular in the area of digital and automation, because it's not just a question of having a long cycle. Rail needs to compete with other modes of transport, and we need to maintain the momentum of innovation.
And I mean, I come in on that as well. I mean, I think it is clear that as the TSIs have evolved, certainly between 2011 and 2014, there were very substantial changes as we moved essentially run at national level to a European one. I don't think for rolling stock we will see hugely substantial changes in the same way again. But of course, have shift to rail, there's no point in us spending €1 billion or whatever on that project if we don't see a lot of innovation, don't implement that innovation quickly. And as I was saying, particularly with digitalization, we actually need to use these processes to bring the cost of the rail system down rapidly. So we actually need a way of, certainly for command and control for signaling, to move away from the very long product cycles we've had in the past and actually allow much greater, more rapid deployal of that technology so that it is everywhere on the network, not just in a few areas, and we still have to keep all the old equipment also there for compatibility. So, of course, we've got to do it in a smart way, but I mean, we cannot stop changing some elements of this, and that is precisely why, again, looking particularly at signaling, CCS, etc., we want to move to a modular architecture which allows us to upgrade the bits that really need upgrading without throwing away the rest of the system. So, I mean, that has to be the smart way for the future. It's clear that there's a slightly difficult transition to get there, but we must do that. Otherwise, we are constantly locked in a system where the railway is actually running with technology that's 50, 60 years old.
That should drive us also to the market increase, obviously. We have, we have one hand raised by Ashish Apte. Can we give him a word?
Yes, Ashish, I've unmuted your mic. If you can tell us your name and organization and state your question.
Yeah. Good evening. I'm Ashish from India. I'm from Fronius. Good evening to all the panelists and wonderful speakers. I was just going through a lot of talks happening on the ridership worries. People may not take the trains and they may not go by trains, but I have got a gut feeling. If you take my personal opinion, people find it more safer to travel in a train rather than getting into the aircraft during this pandemic situation. And the hassles of boarding a train and hassles of boarding an aircraft are a lot of difference. So why we should not use this, preference safe aspect of the people to board a train rather than boarding a flight. And as Nicholas was mentioned regarding the rolling stock, yes, this stock is supposed to roll. If the stock doesn't roll, then nothing is going to be happy for the rail industry. So we should, why not we do this safe aspect of boarding a train and boarding a flight? I think that will turn the tide in favor of the ridership models.
Okay, is there any immediate reaction? I mean, it was more a statement to my view. No, not really.
I am.
Yeah. Okay.
I wanted to know.
I mean, that was clearly made that because we want the best to promote the rail safety and health and safety against the other modes. Yeah. That's complete. Thank you for that. We have Bart Lam.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bart Lam, yeah.
Yes, Bart Lam of MRCE speaking. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Thanks for the presentation so far. Very well arranged and organized. A few comments I would like to add to the make to the previous statements. The rail sector competing with other means of transport. Indeed, that's for all of us, I guess, the challenge. And in this context has been mentioned, reference the fourth railway package. And what I see as the imminent challenge for that is that the national authorities are still not used to work for it. And so far, we as in our daily practices and operations see rather additional work instead of benefits for it. And I do agree with Nicola, and actually we work together with Alstom on this matter as well. That in the end there will be the benefit. My first question would be is how long will it take till we get to that point where there is the benefit for us as asset owners and operators. And the second question is regarding the ERTS TMS investments. I think Keir mentioned about this. And I do appreciate and understand the need for the uniformity of the infra. The question I have in that is that too often, and also historically, but also still for the future, we see that we have to adjust the rolling equipment with a lot of capital intensive adjustments to the equipment attached to it. And we don't see the end of the tunnel yet. So the question is how is that perceived? I do understand again the advantage for the infra, but for the rolling equipment, there's actually a disadvantage because in practice, what it means is that operators do get the same service or the same equipment for that matter, but there's a lot of investment requirement and there's no added value in return. So I'd like to know what you think of that. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, for me, the interpretation of the question is very clear. Where is the business case for the railway undertaking or train operating company?
Okay, well, just very quickly, because I see time's about to run out. We now have a situation where hopefully we really have a single baseline, so ERTMS equipment should be able to run everywhere. What we next want is to start actually getting infrastructure managers to remove the historic systems, the Class B systems. If they do that, then you take out a lot of cost on the locomotive. You also take out a lot more cost trackside, some of which should be recycled to the RU through reduced track access charges, and we are looking at some measures to try and speed that through the system. And then once you've done all of that, you actually get rolling stock, which you can use and even redeploy around Europe much more readily. So you get a lot more flexibility, you get a lot more security, if you like, in your investment in rolling stock, because it can be used everywhere in the same way that Ryanair move planes between destinations depending on what's actually working. Now, we're still away from completely delivering that, but I think we are now moving in the right direction on it at least.
Joseph, anything to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add very clearly, there has been a difficult situation for companies like MRCE, specifically with historical locomotives. I am aware of several cases which go back to 2005, 2007, and it is very difficult to manage specifically from an economic point of view. But as I mentioned before, now we are in a different situation. As Kira has highlighted, we have now a stable baseline 3. We have also the tools, both the vehicle authorization from the agency, which will authorize also the DHMS onboard and the DHMS trackside approval. So that will create a much more stable situation. We still need to solve how we bridge between the historic problem and the now situation that is given now. The other question by Bart was, when do we see the benefits from the new authorization regime? I believe this is going rather quickly, because already in the last year, where we had only the Netherlands, France, Italy, Slovenia, Greece, etc., we already saw some significant improvements, and in particular, a much better cooperation of the individual NSAs with the agency, but also of the individual NSAs with each other, which has in turn simplified the life for the applicants. Now, with going to the whole of Europe very soon, 31st of October, I believe that within 2-3 years, we will come to a much more harmonized situation than we have ever seen before.
Thank you, Joseph. And it's good to finish with the kind of the positive messages you just presented. Thank you very much for that, so that we have a good perspective transferring from the current technology to the new digital future that would really be increasing our profitability and competitiveness. I would really definitely like to thank all the panelists, all the participants, the speakers, Kier Fitch, Joseph Doppelbauer, Nicola Kurt-Bauer, for taking part in this afternoon. Just maybe, if you allow me, because they said that we have finalized, this kind of the positive message. I suggest you also check the situation in Switzerland, because there are some claims by Mathieu Ochsenbein, if you know him, saying, yeah, but we have ETCS, we have everything digital, and the capacity has dropped by 10%. But this is not for now, because now we really have to finish. So this is rather the question for the future session, and also for the organizers to consider how really, to mitigate all the risk resulting from the implementation of the digital technology, that we are not going backwards, but always forward for the better and more optimistic future of railways. Once again, many, many thanks to everyone. I hope to see and meet you, especially in person, as soon as the situation allows us. And good luck, take care, and keep safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.